Hi guys, and welcome to the second episode of our online show Coffee Under the Cultural Bridge, in which we talk about cross-cultural work. Every quarter we introduce one inspiring professional from different areas of life who share their perspective and talk about their way of dealing with cultural differences. In previous episode we had here an HR leader for Central Europe who talked about her stories and experiences from Czech Republic, Slovakia, Germany, South Africa and United Arab Emirates. And I wanted to thank you all for all the likes, shares and comments you guys send us. In case you missed that episode, you can still find it on our YouTube channel. Today we have here another very inspiring leader. He was born in UK to a British mother and a Greek father. He spent most of his childhood in Greece but graduated from a university in United Kingdom. He started his sales career in a British multinational company, but later on he joined a Japanese corporation which had him relocated to Switzerland. And currently he is based in Slovakia, where as a country manager he achieved a tremendous result. From a very small office with only few people, he has built a large, high-performing organization. Please welcome our guest, a Greek-British leader working for a Japanese company based in Slovakia, Panayotis Exindaris. Panos, welcome and thank you very much for having accepted our invitation.
Thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm very happy to be with you today.
Thank you. Panos, before we start talking about your professional career, why don't we spend a couple of minutes talking about your family background? You were raised in a bicultural family. How much do you think this played a role in your decision to work in a multinational environment?
Yeah, I mean, as you said in the introduction, my mother is English and my father is Greek, so I did grow up in a bicultural environment. And on top, both my parents worked for multinational companies. So my upbringing was always in an environment of multicultural and traveling and a bit more global aspect. So for me, it was a no-brainer that when I finish university, I want to work for a multinational company because there I can get opportunities to work globally. So I was very determined from when I started my career that I do want to work abroad. So that didn't matter where I will be, but the only opportunity I could get to do that is through a multinational. So the truth is that growing up through my bicultural family, but also because of how my parents brought me up and the overall environment I grew up in, the multinational environment and working for a multinational company was an obvious choice for me.
Mm-hmm. Now you have your own family. You and your Greek wife are raising three amazing kids. Yes. And it might seem that you're raising them in a monocultural environment, but in fact you have taken their education even one step further, because moving from one country to another, you are raising them in a very multicultural environment. Do you observe any impact of this international environment on your kids?
Yes, for sure. I mean, one of the biggest, let's say, fears we have with my wife, because we moved, is what identity do our kids have? Because a lot of times kids for expats or traveling abroad are these kids of the third countries. You don't have a country to be linked to. So what we really try to do is we don't have this monocultural aspect, but we do want to grow up our kids as though they have an identity and they are Greek, because they need to have some anchor, if you want, in their life for the future. So we do take care of this, and we look to go 3 times a year to Greece, so they keep the connections with the family, the culture, what do you do in Greece, so they know what it means to be a Greek and to be close to the language, and of course the grandparents, parents and family. But on top, as you really noted, the truth is that my kids growing up internationally, they do have different experiences probably than a kid that grows up in one environment. And this comes from school a lot, because my kids go to school and they have Korean, Chinese, Malay, Slovak, Ukrainian, so my kids start understanding that, okay, the world is full of different type of cultures, different kids, different way of celebrating birthdays. So we go to birthday parties, a very different way that what songs you sing, let's say, for a birthday party, and what food you eat, what different cultural or background that the families have. So we spend a lot of our weekends with Slovak, Brazilian, Portuguese families, Malay, Chinese families all together. So you have this blend of cultures, of different experiences, of things that kids do back home, and then they start discussing and saying, well, how do you celebrate Christmas? So Christmas is very different how it's celebrated in the Western world or in the Asian world, or if you have a background and you're from Israel. So all of these things start making the kids a lot more curious, start understanding the world a lot differently. Hopefully for us, and this I think is the biggest benefit we have for our kids, it's not that they go and they learn English, let's say, and Greek for us, the biggest benefit they have is that they truly become global citizens. And I think this cross-cultural or multicultural environment they grow in is what makes them become more flexible, more adaptable, and more ready for the world, as the world is becoming smaller and smaller today, through technology, through education. So I would say that our kids are very lucky in this way, or we want to believe they are lucky. Yeah, this is what we believe with my wife. And they are grown in an environment where they truly become multicultural, but they don't forget the background, which is they understand what it means to be Greek. And talking to various expat friends, one of the issues that we see is that a lot of times, if you're far away from home, it's difficult then to connect. So for us also, the language is a key thing that we keep alive. So we talk at home Greek. My kids go for Greek school once a week. In the meantime, they're learning Slovak, French and English at school. So language-wise and experience-wise, I believe the kids are benefiting a lot from this for the future. A lot of questions we get a lot of times is, but don't you feel like nomads? Yeah, because you're traveling from one place to the other, and this is difficult for the kids. And why would you do this to your kids? Yeah, even our family in Greece would say this, or friends that I meet in Slovakia or in Geneva where I lived, they say, don't you feel like a nomad, that you're changing all the time?
So what do you say? Why are you doing that to your kids?
Well, I mean, we do it truly because we believe this is a benefit for the kids. The starting point was that we wanted to go global and we wanted to live globally. But for our kids, we truly believe that this is a benefit. Yeah? We don't think we are punishing the kids. Yeah? Actually, we do believe that we are helping the kids grow, develop, become more flexible, and become ready for what is coming in the future. And this makes them even more adaptable to different things that come into their life, because the world is not only about your country. Yes, we have borders and we have religion and we have things like this, but at the end of the day, we're all people. It's one race, people. So we all should be talking to each other, we all should be close to each other, and I think the kids benefit from this. I think, and the benefit for us is we managed to move with the kids when they were a small age. So my son was born in Geneva, my first daughter was born in Greece, my third daughter was born in Slovakia. So yes, they know they are born in different countries, they have their identity, which is Greek, but then they understand that the world is really nothing about differences. It's more about how can you cross culture, how can you build, and how can you become, if you want, friends with different aspects of culture, religion, life. So I think my answer is that we don't do this to the kids. We actually believe that this is good for the kids and they are enjoying, and because they are small, they get used to changing. I think if my kids were in teenage and then we moved, it would probably bring more difficulties because they would be more close to the friends and into the society there. So I think we were quite lucky in the timing that we got, that the kids moved and we're all used to this changing environment every 3-4 years.
Right. As you said, it might be confusing and challenging for the kids sometimes in certain occasions or situation. How do you and your wife help your kids to overcome all the challenges related to life across cultures?
Yeah, we try to be honest and transparent about what will be coming, so it's not as though we don't hide the fact that we will be moving in our life, in our careers. We don't hide the fact that the career choices that I have made or we have made together with my wife for our family will be that we will be changing from time to time. So we do take them through this and explain them in small bits of truth that they need to have, is that yes, we are living in Slovakia now, but there will be a time that we will probably move without exactly knowing where we will go. My son is asking me, so can you ask your boss if he can take us to a warmer country next time? Yeah, because he gets cold in the winter. And we try to keep this element of home. What is home and what is then living abroad, and we prepare them for what is going on. Sometimes it's a bit hard, they get upset when the friends are leaving, but we try to explain that this is part of the life, this is good. My daughter, she's 9, my oldest daughter, she's on Skype with 4 different friends, one in Spain, one in Japan, one in Greece, and she's in Slovakia, and they're all talking together, and I'm like, what? You're 9, and they have videos and they leave videos to each other. So I think they are getting ready for this. We are trying to prepare them. We try to keep them connected to the friends, and we explain to them that this is part of life, and this is something that we've chosen all together to do. And then what we try to do is we try to find out a lot of things about Slovakia that we live in. So we try to travel a lot to learn a lot about the cultures, different places. Kids from time to time, they need a break to go to an aqua park, so we will go up to the High Tatras, spend the day there, and kids enjoy it. I think if they have a good life at home and the school is good and they have friends, for them this is what counts, yeah. And that's what we try to do: have a happy life at home and do things for the kids, irrespective of where we live, irrespective if we live in Slovakia or Panama or whatever. So that's how we try to manage it.
Very well. Now let's talk about your international career. After various years in sales in Greece, you have been relocated to the company's headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. Here you were dealing with people from literally all around the world. How did this experience enhance your cross-cultural skills?
Well, I would say initially I was a bit naive in the way that I approached it. Yeah, I was like, okay, great opportunity. We go to Geneva. We heard a lot of things about Geneva, like, wow, Geneva, this amazing city, and not so amazing. Finally, when we went there, very nice city. And in terms of the work, to be honest, I did not take into account how much the cross-cultural or the different cultures would play a role in the way of working and the way of developing. So basically, what I did is I took this as full head-on. Yes, traveled as much as I could. I was lucky enough to travel to more than 40 countries and work with different people and different projects. And I think that finally this really developed my understanding of how the world is, yeah, because a lot of times, even though growing in a bicultural family, yes, you know how the UK is, yes, you know how the Greeks are or Greece is, but you really don't know how the Russians are, how different are they from Ukrainians, how the Slovaks are and the Czechs, how the, in the United States, what difference you have, or Canada versus United States, and for sure you don't realize Asia, yes, and how Asia is very different to the way of working. So in terms of work, I think I really started to differentiate in the way of approaching people or approaching projects, yes. You can't be always very direct, yeah. So growing up in Greece and with a British mother, I'm pretty direct, yeah. Very crude sense of humor, I would say, and very direct. But you see that this doesn't always work everywhere. So I think it makes you listen more, understand more, ask more questions, start reading about things, so you don't really go in this naive, I can change the world. You start thinking a bit more about what is the cultural background, what drives people, how do you need to communicate, what are behaviors that are accepted in one culture and not in another, yeah. So you do tend to put your foot in it sometimes, yes, in terms of if you don't know the cultures and how you behave. Yeah, so I think this really helped me develop as well, but it helped me understand a bit better how the world is, yeah. There's a lot of common threads because, as I said, we're all people here, we're all human. But there is differences in how people behave, how people think, and how people react. Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference in how somebody would react to a question who comes from the United States and somebody that comes from probably Europe and somebody that's come from Asia. Yeah, it would be a very different reaction. And if you take the reading as it inherently, then you think that somebody doesn't care, yeah? Probably somebody from Asia does not care because there's not a lot of emotional reactions. But the truth is, they do, and they probably listen a lot more than, a European would listen. So I think this starts changing your mindset about the world and start changing a bit how you behave with people, yeah? I mean, yes, going to management trainings, you understand that everybody has a different character and behavior. However, then if you start looking at the cultural thing, you start understanding, okay, the educational system or the upbringing or the history, even modern or late history plays a big role in how people behave, especially in groups. So I think this really, I didn't expect it, to be honest. Yeah, I was, as I said, very naive in the beginning and I took it very lightly. But finally, I think the benefit was huge. And, a quick pace of learning this, these 3 years in Geneva really helped me develop my EQ, if you want, yeah, EQ or CQ, let's say cross-cultural. I think this helped me a lot to develop, yeah, as a person, as a professional, but also my behavior as a person.
Having a Greek-British background, was there something in Switzerland that really took you by surprise?
Yes, I can't cut the grass on Sundays, yeah. I think, in Geneva, what was quite interesting is that Geneva has a very multinational character and a very Swiss character. So living in Geneva, you don't really mingle with Swiss people and Geneva people. You more mingle, if you want, with the expats, yeah. And there's a huge Greek community there. So, I would say that a big difference was the way of behaving, yes, in terms of how you, aside of the joke, how you have to sustain and keep some rules, how prim and proper things are, and really how people behave in a very different way in terms of, what time restaurants are open, what people do on the weekends, Sunday shops are closed, nowhere to eat, nowhere to drink coffee, so you would end up, in Starbucks with basically your friends. And very different approach to social and family life, a lot more closed. We would typically have a barbecue on a Sunday and we would have 40 people over, something that you would not usually see happening in Switzerland.
So you couldn't do that on Sundays?
You could, you could find a way, we were lucky, we had Italians and French neighbors, so this was a lot easier. But I think the way, if you want, of growing up and behaving was a bit different. My son went to Swiss kindergarten there, and we saw a bit of a different way versus how we expected it to be, in Greece, a bit more formal in Switzerland, if you want, versus what it was in Greece. Different sense of humor, I would say, than the British background. So I would say there was some differences, but more in the daily life, and how things worked, rather than really, oh my God, this is like really different. Small details on a day-to-day basis.
Few years later, you got an interesting offer to relocate to Slovakia, which I assume at that time was a totally unknown country to you. Was there something, or maybe it still is, which you consider to be very challenging of living here in Slovakia?
Yes, I can tell you the first reactions when we found out about Slovakia, I was delighted. Didn't know a lot about the country, to be honest, at that time. My wife was a bit like, I read on expat sites, I'm not sure this is the best place to go. Just okay, let's take a minute to think, We're going to Europe, we're going to a country which is growing and developing a lot. Let's go and see what is, happening in Bratislava, and then, anyway, we decided we'll do this in our life. So when we came to Slovakia, we didn't know what to expect, we expected a lot different things than what we got. We were coming from Geneva and everybody was like, oh, so you're moving from Geneva to Bratislava? Is this really good? I can tell you honestly, I'm a lot happier living in Bratislava than I was in Geneva with my family. Work-wise, of course, the opportunity was amazing, but for my family, it's been a lot better, and downtown Bratislava, the whole, area of Slovakia was really good. Challenges, I think, the biggest challenge we have is when we have to go to hospitals, That's a big challenge, because you have to communicate, and of course, people don't speak English so much, and we don't speak a lot of Slovak, given we won't stay a lot here. I would say this is a challenge sometimes when you have to go to hospitals. Haircuts, always for expats, I think this is the number one, But I would say in terms of challenge, no. I think, Slovakia and the whole Slovak people we meet and we work with, and when we're out with people, is very friendly. So it's very different than what we expected. We expected more of a closed, environment, society. I think what is happening in Bratislava and in Slovakia overall is really amazing. For me, it's kind of if you want, the jewel or the diamond of Europe that people don't know a lot. Not many people know that Slovakia was part of the Austrian-Hungarian monarchy. They don't know about the Old Town. Probably, don't know about High Tatras. I think average Europeans would probably still think about Czechoslovakia, which I think is a bit disappointing, because really Slovakia is growing. There's so many expats here now, all the business centers, multinational companies growing, the car factories. So I think I was reading about 2 months ago, there's more than 85,000 expats living in Slovakia, mainly in Bratislava. So I think what we finally got was a lot better than what we thought. So, challenges, you get the daily challenges of life. But I would say that our life is pretty easy in Slovakia, and nice. So not really. We came with a bit of fear. What will we meet? What will the country be? How will it be? And finally, I think it's a lot better than we ever really thought.
And the shops are open on Sundays.
Oh my God, this is amazing. All the shops are open on Sundays. But it's the whole vibe. The restaurants, how you can be out. It's very kids-friendly. This is something that we love about Slovakia. You go to the pharmacy, there's a kids' corner. You go to the doctor's office, there's a kids' corner. You go to the restaurants, there's a kid corner. You go to the hotel, there's a kids' corner. So it's very kids-friendly. You see a lot of, families bringing up people. People don't look at you strangely. Oh, you brought the kid together, When the winter is a bit daunting, but this is nothing to do with the country. Then the summer, it's day until 10. You see kids out playing, nature very close. So I think being a city boy and growing up in a city, in a big city of Athens, we discovered that, there is nature, there is biking, there is things like this. We go out with our friends, there's a lot of things you can do which we did not do back home, yeah? So I think this has been a benefit for us all together, yeah? Seeing a bit of a different way of living, this has helped us.
You have been working in sales for many years and you got experience from various markets. My background is in international sales as well, and I remember that back in time I was told customers are all the same all around the world. They just want to get good product for a good price. Would you agree with this statement, or do you adapt your sales strategy and flex and modify your negotiation skills based upon the culture you are dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, of course, everybody wants a good product, a good price, and I think globalization is something that is happening or has happened in our times and will continue happening. Yeah? So you have all of these multinational or global brands and things rolling out. However, I think in terms of how you approach in the commercial part of the business, you need to be different. Yeah? What works probably in Slovakia does not work when you're in Morocco, yeah? And does not work when you're in Malaysia or in China or in Japan. I felt this a lot, yeah, coming from a background where negotiations are pretty tough. They can get very personal. You can dive into somebody and, conflict is not an issue, yes, when you come from the part of the world I've grown up. Conflict is not a big issue, yes. This is something that, probably you exert also your power from the company side and the client. I would say, moving to Slovakia, it's a bit different, yeah. You don't have this direct conflict. You would go a bit around it. And you would not expect in the commercial part of the business that people would engage and, even insult you sometimes. Being somewhere like the Middle East, probably you have a lot more emotions and expressions and banging on the table sometimes, yeah. So I think it's very different in terms of how you behave, and it comes down to the culture and the educational system or the family systems that you grow in. I think the basis is that, of course, nobody wants to have a bad product for a bad price, yeah. Everybody wants to have the best for the best price. That's a basis of, let's say, the marketing mix. But then in terms of how you really behave and how you manage to engage, if you want, with your customers to gain this, let's say, win-win, yeah, this is, I think, very different in different cultures, yeah. So I would say, no, I wouldn't have the same approach everywhere I go. And, being an expat, this was a big learning, yeah. I coming to Slovakia with a lot of sales experience. Yeah, of course, you go to negotiate, but you can't speak the language. So then you get the translator, and then it's a mess. Yeah, you get the translator, and there's misunderstandings, and your translator, you don't know if he's translating what you're saying. And then you really need to take a step back and sit down with your team and say, okay, what is it that we need to do? How do we need to behave? What will our strategy be? Who are the influencers? Some markets or some countries, you need to talk to the boss directly. You talk to the boss, he will take the decision. Some countries, you don't go to the boss. You have to go below the boss. Some markets, you need to be formal. You need to go with a presentation, to sit down on the table and say, look, these are the numbers, we'll get this. In some markets or countries, you need to sit down and build a relationship. And it's more about who do you know, how do you behave, do you go and visit, customers. I think it's very important, and I found out that a lot of times it's important to acknowledge, and that the head of a company needs to go and visit and talk to the customers. Yeah? In some other markets, you have to be hidden and you have to be presented, something like the Queen. Yeah? Just when the time comes, you can see the boss. So I think this is very different, and this is something that I learned in Geneva, but also being in Slovakia. So I would say you need to have a different approach by culture. But people are people, yeah? So you should be respectful and you should not behave in a bad way. This is a common base, I think, as a human being. But in terms of how you approach and how do you talk, I think you should be different. Yeah?
Some time ago you contacted our education company Cultural Bridge and requested a cross-cultural training for you and your team here in Slovakia. What was the reason? What was your what was behind your decision to ask for such a development activity?
Well, I think the starting point was discussing with you about what cross-cultural is and how this aspect comes into life. I would say it was something very new. But what we found out with my team is that we had some issues in terms of how we interact between us. Yes, there was some misunderstanding from time to time. So even though I don't speak the language fully, I understand things. You start picking up signals that things are not working always very well. Yes, you start seeing a bit strange faces, a bit of the behaviors, and you start feeling yourself that maybe something is not really working here. Then you start looking, is it my behavior? Is it what I say? Is it because of the targets we have? And you start understanding, that the typical EQ, IQ is not the only thing. Yes, you try to work on that. There's something else missing, yeah? And then, discussing with you and reading about the topic, then I sat down with my management team and we said, okay, probably the cultural differences we have, because we're a multicultural team, yeah? I'm Greek, and we have a Lithuanian lady in our team, and then we have our Slovak colleagues, even though Slovakia is very colorful as well. Yes, we have a bit of a Hungarian part sometimes coming in. And we saw that really the cultural background is probably something that creates some friction to the team in terms of how we behave. And how we cooperate between us, and what is the discussions, what was said, what is the body languages. I'm very expressive, I try to not use my hands a lot, but I am very expressive sometimes, so this is sometimes perceived as a bit offensive to people or a bit attacking. So I think this was the key reason that we said, okay, let's have a look in terms of what are the different cultures that we have, why do people act like they act. And it opened a bit our horizons, because when you say culture, you probably think, yeah, culture, given. And then you started asking some questions about, educational system, art system, family system. You're thinking, okay, probably it's a bit deeper than I really thought. And it was a lot deeper, yeah. And on the back of this, I think there's a lot of things we've started to change in terms of how the team works, how we all behave between us. So first of all, I think it's recognizing the behaviors which are personal or driven by culture, which is a lot easier now, yes. And then the second is that you really can start working a bit more deeper in terms of what does the team need, what do you need to change as a leader of the team in order to have a more engaged team, because at the end of the day, people should be happy, yeah. I mean, we spend many hours a day together. We should all be happy working together, having fun, and of course, achieving great targets. I think that's the key. And we had to move into a next phase. Yes, we grew up from a very small team. We became very big, and suddenly we're like, okay, now we need to change a few things. And I think this helped us, and it's helping us on our journey where we want to get in terms of really taking a step back and thinking about these things and stop, probably having these child illnesses that we had a few months ago. So I think this was the reason that I reached out to the company and we said, let's have a look at this. And to be honest, it broadened our horizons overall. I mean, for me personally, but I know for my whole team, this really helped them get a bit deeper into the thinking of why is he or she behaving in this way. Yes, it's not because he doesn't like me, but probably he or she thinks it's acceptable.
You are a very experienced international professional. What advice would you give to someone who wants to work across cultures and succeed?
Do it. No, I mean, I think the benefit that you get in the long term is huge. So I would say that whoever wants to start a career, I would say, if you really want, to broaden yourself, if you want to stretch yourself, if you really want to do this, go on the international, trip. It's not about the money. Of course, it's about the career and the money and the aspiration. This is nice. Yeah, it's a nice to have. But I think what you really get at the end of the day is that you meet different cultures. You live in different countries. You really benefit because you manage to pick up things from the different people you meet. You really start, for me, a lot of times it's like, collective experience. It's like opening a book and reading. But when I sit with my Portuguese and Brazilian friends and we say, oh my God, we are very similar in these and these and these things. You're like, how come? We are so far away. Yeah, Brazil is so far away. So I would say to young professions that are starting, do it, but don't do it only for the career. Yeah, this is one aspect. Do it because you really want to develop. Do it because you probably will have a family and they will benefit from this. And do it because you become more global, more diverse, more flexible, and you really have to stretch yourself. And you have to learn how to adapt. You can't be I am as I am and that's it. You really and it's a continuous learning, yeah. And I think this is the benefit, and this is what I enjoy, that it's continuous learning, yeah. It's every day you really have to change something. Every day you need to think about it, and you need to learn different things. So I would say, do it, but do it because it will develop yourself and it will make you probably not a better person, but a more broad perspective. Yeah? You can do an MBA, you can do a PhD. Good, these things help, but for your behavior, and I think the world as we are looking at it. I mean, if you look 20 years from now, yeah, it will be very different. Probably the world will be different than what we see today. It's very different today than it was 20 years ago, and you will need to be adaptable. I think you will need to be able to recognize what is going on in the world. Yeah? So I think even for people that want to go into politics, it would be good to have multinational experiences, cross-cultural, because it helps you reach out and become more flexible. Yeah? And I think our world should become more of a one world rather than really start separating, which is what we see today. And I think this drives it. If you travel, if you live abroad, if you spend a good amount of time and you really cooperate and you work, if you want to go on an international career, do it, but learn the locals, go to the local restaurants, do what the locals do. Don't go and live in a bubble and say, I don't care about what happens out of here. Find out what the problems are. Go to the villages, sit down with people, try to speak the language. Even though Slovak is hard, man. I mean, it's not the easiest, not that Greek is, but try. And I think this really helps you and develops you. So that would be my advice. I mean, do it, but do it because it will develop you.
Panos, thank you very much for joining us today and for sharing all your stories and experiences with us. I know how busy you are, so I really, really appreciate your willingness to talk about how critical and important the cross-cultural skills are to you, your family, your kids, and your team here in Slovakia. So thanks again.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Andrzej.
Okay guys, this is it for today. If you found this episode interesting, please do let us know, send us your comments, and feel free to share this video with your friends. We wish you an amazing summer and stay curious because we are preparing some surprise for you. See you in September.